Now it says live, right? But I don't believe it. I never believe it. Never believe it. So now what I do is I go to my profile on Twitter. Okay. Now what I do is I see us. I believe it. We are now live. This is so exciting. And now what I do is now click back to you. I see you. I'm back.
Here we are.
I was worried that we couldn't hear you and it was like a technological thing. Now I can hear you. We are perfect. How are you?
I'm amazing today. Every day I'm alive. How are you, Adam?
I am good. I just did an investor series and I finished it only 2 hours ago. And I was ready to do nothing for the rest of the day and just watch my Boeing stock and play some Scrabble. And then, I don't watch investments daily. I try not to. And I don't watch Bitcoin. I don't own Bitcoin. But it's hard to ignore that you guys are all going crazy on Twitter, right? It's insanity.
But you have to remember, Adam, I've been in this industry for 6 years. Since Bitcoin was less than $100, we've been through hell and back as an industry. I've worked with hundreds, if not thousands of founders. I've invested in over 200 businesses, built 2 businesses in the space.
We're going to go backwards, right?
Yeah. Okay.
This is like a coffee. Now this is like a late afternoon coffee with friends. So
I have a coffee.
Yeah, if I get to interrupt you, it's because I'm rude, but I'm rude amongst friends. Okay? Is that cool? Can you go backwards? Would you be kind enough to introduce yourself? Would that be all right?
I would love to. So hi, I am Meltem Demirrors. I am a human. I am not an extraterrestrial. So let's start there. I'm the chief strategy officer of a firm called CoinShares. We're an asset manager with $2 billion in assets under management in our exchange traded products that track the price of Bitcoin. They're traded in Europe, not in the US at the moment, but we're working on it. We also have a trading desk. We trade 10 to 15 billion in volume every year. We have a venture fund that I manage, and then we do a lot of other things: indexation, asset digitization, lending. So we're a global financial services business in the crypto space. That's us.
Yeah, that's really exciting. And you have one of my favorite names of all time. It's Meltem Demirrors.
So my family would love to hear that. It's a Turkish name, so I'm very proud of it. It means a lot to me.
Yeah, you should be, and your parents are even prouder, right? So can you help me better understand? And I will tell you, I have no positions in Bitcoin. I did something with Anthony Pompliano, who's like Investor Series number 4. And he was very persuasive and he was very helpful, actually. Let me take that back. Persuasive is probably not a fair characterization of it. He was very thoughtful, right? And patient, because there's such asymmetrical information. And people like myself are on the imperfect side of the asymmetrical information. So it's always hard for an investor, no matter how sophisticated or unsophisticated, to even know when to come in, right?
Well, let me say something slightly different, Adam. I think what's challenging about Bitcoin is it means so many different things to so many different people. So the challenge is you could talk to Anthony, or Pomp as we lovingly call him. You could talk to me, you could talk to 15 other people, and they would each give you a different characterization of what Bitcoin is and why it matters. Because there is no company, there is no CEO. Bitcoin is, it's a global open source software project. So it means a lot of different things to different people. And depending on where they sit in the ecosystem, they could have a totally different articulation of how they even begin to describe Bitcoin. And this is just a totally new paradigm, right? Boeing has a CEO. Boeing has an IR department. Yeah. Bitcoin doesn't, right? I'm part of the informal IR department of Bitcoin, along with the thousands of people you see on the internet.
Now, is that dangerous because it relies on each of the evangelists and each of the advocates to be truthful, right? And to also be aware of the ignorance of their own domain, right? And that does create problems that now you become accountable for somebody else. There are some definitely misconceptions about Bitcoin that can be furthered by some of its advocates.
And we've certainly seen that. There's an interesting thing called the Murray-Gell-Mann effect, right? And this is when you're an expert in something and you read about it in the media, you'll read it and be like, this is totally wrong. And in the crypto space, I read so much of the media coverage of crypto and it's completely mischaracterized. I'm sure you feel that way about certain areas you're an expert in. But look, this is one of the unique things about Bitcoin that makes it so different as an asset class. It's also, believe it or not, the first bottoms up or retail led financial movement, the first asset class where retail got in before institutions did. Typically, it starts at the top and it trickles down. This started at the bottom. I'm in New Hampshire right now, right? Look at this night behind me. This is the night from the Satoshi Roundtable, which is the first sort of event series that was held in the Bitcoin space starting back in 2012. Like, this started with anarchists and libertarians and crazy people who believed in a different world.
So let me say, I was one of those anarchists, and well, I'm not an anarchist, right? I'm actually anti-anarchist. But because of my experience with a company that may predate you, which was called Kazaa, which was a peer-to-peer sharing company.
Oh, I used Kazaa often.
Yeah, a lot of people didn't. And it got shut down by regulators and by a kind of a marketing campaign to shut it down. And I became very interested in Bitcoin as kind of this anti-status weapon because I hate that government will constrain technology until they can be its master. So either you're going to be the master of something, or be mastered by it. And so I got into Bitcoin, and I sold out at around $3,000. I got in pretty cheap because the merchant processing. A lot of the developers left in merchant processing. There was a lot of dumping from Chinese mining farms. And since then, I've just been a speculator, and you guys have done, I speak of you guys as like this whole type of universe, right? And I speak of it without gender. It's just because I'm, I say it. So, yeah. But it's really been remarkable. So does having all of those kind of evangelists and all the IR departments, does that kind of defragmentation, is that part of the movement right now that we're seeing in Bitcoin?
It absolutely is. The beauty of Bitcoin is its value is in the eye of the beholder. So there are many different reasons that someone might be interested in allocating to Bitcoin. I see LA Jen commenting in the chat saying she holds Bitcoin to have a private option outside of the government. Some people want an uncorrelated asset. Some people want an inflation hedge. Some people want a better way to do online payments. There can be a million and one different reasons. And the beauty of Bitcoin is it has the capacity and the breadth to accommodate a wide audience. It's a massive umbrella, a massive tent under which we can create a massive social movement. And Bitcoin is first and foremost a social movement. Because if you recall, Bitcoin was a product of the last financial crisis. And in 2008 and in 2009, the United States government printed an unprecedented amount of money. And when Satoshi released a mined the first Bitcoin block, hashed into that block was the headline, Chancellor on brink of bailout of banks. Now, 12 years later, this financial crisis is bringing Bitcoin into the mainstream because not only do we have more money printing than we had in 2008, we have treble the amount. It's an unprecedented pace of monetary debasement.
So does Bitcoin's rise, or even the interest in Bitcoin, does that kind of correlate with a theory of kind of the collapse of financial institutions, or kind of the debasement of the dollar?
I think there are two trends driving Bitcoin right now. One is certainly the debasement of the dollar. Short dollar, right, is a trade everyone's making. You've talked about it a lot in your investor series. And then the second trend is digitization and going long fintech. We're talking about a step beyond fintech. We're talking about creating an entirely new financial system that is open source software and is accessible to anyone, anywhere with a smartphone. It's profoundly novel. Nothing like this has ever existed before.
Yeah, so let me just correct one point though. I'm very bullish on the dollar. There's a huge dollar crunch that's going on that is going to continue indefinitely, and there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. But I can clearly see that the dollar, and it's a short squeeze in the dollar. So we're really not seeing a short on the dollar. We're seeing it the other way. We're just seeing a real dollar crunch because of how much dollar denominated debt is there.
But Adam, the other thing you and I have talked about, in our own conversations is there is a fundamental, geopolitical shift that is happening. We're moving from a unilateral world to a multipolar world. And in this multipolar world, we see increasing competition among currencies and jurisdictions. Now, historically, we've defined financial systems by the boundaries of our physical nation states, right? So we typically define jurisdiction, regulation, and regulatory perimeter by the actual country in which you live. We now live on the internet. We live in cyberspace, but cyberspace doesn't fit neatly into the world of borders and barriers and nation states. And so in my view, the other thing that's so interesting is Bitcoin is a global digital nation state with its own money, but also it's open and accessible no matter where in the world you live. If you were born in Venezuela, you've been dealt a very rough hand in life. If you have the misfortune of living in, say, North Korea, you're precluded from accessing the global financial system. And so Bitcoin creates a level playing field. And again, it's complicated. There's a lot of regulations that exist for very specific reasons. But at the end of the day, right, there are entire swaths of the world's population that are excluded from capital markets and from financial markets and exchanging value.
Okay, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time because this is breaking news, right? So I want to do a whole new investor series about it, and you're so informative, and there's just so much to discuss, and people have questions that I want to be responsive to. But can we start out with just a better understanding of the price right now? And because I know that there's kind of I don't even know what the right word for it. I was going to use Wall Street terms, but you guys don't really use those same type of terms because it's such a different market. But there's so much observation of all the trades that are going on, the buying and selling, and where they're happening from. And where do you attribute all the movement now to? Is this kind of on the retail side that people are bidding it up, or is it someone taking a real inventory in it?
Yes. So there are two things that we track. Every week we publish a report that tracks inflows into Bitcoin products. So over the last 12 months alone, we've seen over $15 billion of inflows into publicly listed Bitcoin products, and probably close to $100 billion of inflows into private funds and private products. And these inflows are coming not just from Bitcoiners. We have Mass Mutual, an insurance company, adding $100 million of Bitcoin to its general balance sheet. We have, firms like Square adding Bitcoin to their balance sheet. MicroStrategy has become a shadow Bitcoin ETF. The company holds a crazy amount of Bitcoin.
Yeah. How's the stock? And it's a stock that I don't watch, but I have seen Pomp discuss it somewhat. My stock world is kind of narrow. A lot of people know that. I am 10 miles deep into just a couple of things. So has their stock reflected? Has it moved? It has.
Yes. Crazy. And the thing is, it's not just MicroStrategy. When PayPal announced that they were adding cryptocurrencies to their platform, the stock price popped 20%. When Square announced their Bitcoin results in Q1, Q2, Q3, every quarter, income attributed to Bitcoin sales on Square's Cash App platform doubled. Last quarter alone attributed 4%, not just to the top line, to the bottom line. So 4% of Square's profits are coming from Bitcoin sales. Investors notice that. And if you look at Square and PayPal, Square is up 300% on the year. PayPal is up only 150%. So there is a clear performance difference in how public markets and private markets are valuing companies with exposure to the cryptocurrency space.
And I'd have to listen to their earnings calls, and I haven't with those particular companies. It's a hobby of mine, and then I want to see some questions. But are they holding it in their treasury, or is it segregated from their treasury, or do you know how they're holding it?
Great question. So before I got into crypto, was a corporate treasurer at ExxonMobil. So I come from the world of corporate treasury, and at the time, ExxonMobil was the world's largest company. It no longer is. by a long shot, right? So look, what these companies are doing is they are directly holding Bitcoin on their balance sheet. One ongoing debate, right, is Bitcoin cash or cash equivalent, or do you put it in a different, more speculative bucket? And the thing is, Bitcoin is highly liquid. You can buy and sell large amounts of Bitcoin in the market today with very little slippage. And so more and more what we see people doing is adding Bitcoin to the balance sheet as a treasury asset. And increasingly, it's beginning to migrate into the highly liquid cash and cash equivalents bucket, which is fascinating.
Okay, so we're gonna go to a couple of questions and a couple of observations, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time, so we're gonna try and keep it a little bit short. So it's not gonna be a speed round like I normally do, on the investor series, but it's gonna be kind of a speed round. Okay, so and I don't want you to feel obligated to questions that might put you into a particular spot, and I don't know what questions that might be. So feel free to decline anything respectfully, right? So Mr. Y Singapore, thank you so much for being here, says, what's your opinion on PYPL involvement with Bitcoin? Is the company a good proxy for investing in it?
Yeah, so PayPal, we just chatted about. PayPal announced that they were opening cryptocurrency buying, selling, and trading to their US customers about a month ago. Since then, 20% of US Bitcoin trading volume has happened through PayPal. I personally bought and sold cryptocurrencies on PayPal. It is the cheapest and easiest way for US consumers to participate in crypto. Cheaper than the alternatives, cheaper than Coinbase. It's like a walled garden, meaning when you get exposure to cryptocurrencies through PayPal, it's an omnibus account. You can't move your crypto to other wallets. But if you're looking for price exposure, great proxy. In terms of longer term involvement, I think PayPal is a great way to drive mass adoption. PayPal has 360 million users on their platform, over 30 million merchants, and does 700 billion in transaction volume a year. For contrast, Ant Financial last year did 17 trillion in transaction volume. So PayPal is 700 billion, still pretty small. And interestingly, the Bitcoin network this year alone has processed over $1 trillion in transactions. So Bitcoin itself is actually a larger transactional network than PayPal's. But yes, PayPal is a great gateway for the crypto space. It's a great distribution channel. And I think they're really approaching it in a long-term way. For them, this is not a fad. They're investing in it. They're investing in companies. They're building infrastructure. So I'm very happy that they're involved in the space.
Thank you so much. And the Meltem Demirrors, thank you so much for being here, says Bitcoin predates the financial crisis. It wasn't created in a year. Coincidental time of release. My eyes, I was telling you before, my eyes, the light's right in my eye.
Yeah, so I love this question. And it's this comment, I should say, is absolutely true. Like I said, I actually recorded a whole podcast on this and wrote a whole Medium blog on this. Bitcoin is a social movement. It was planned and released in a very specific way. Whoever Satoshi was had a great amount of self-discipline because they waited until a very precise moment to launch Bitcoin. And the way in which Bitcoin was slowly released to the world, it was put into the cypherpunk mailing list for a reason. If anyone recalls the 1992 Cypherpunk Manifesto, this was a very specific statement about privacy, encryption, and bringing this into the monetary realm. So certainly, Bitcoin was not a happy accident. This was a carefully planned, carefully coordinated social movement that had good marketing, good distribution, a good strategy. The early people who were involved are all known cypherpunks. This is a very deliberate and very intentional thing. And I am so grateful. It is such a beautiful, beautiful leaderless movement that challenges us all to become advocates for Bitcoin and to live up to the principles set forth by Satoshi.
So you're very forgiving of what might have been kind of a little bit of a racketeering within the way they traded it and created kind of a pricing history for Bitcoin.
But look, this has happened in every market, Adam. When I started trading in my early career, I traded ethanol and methanol. There are about 20 or 30 brokers around the world who traded it. It was totally an inside market. Look at JP Morgan's metals desk. It was just hit with RICO charges. That was a professional racketeering operation for 15 years, right? This is how markets that are tightly controlled start.
And we're going to continue skipping on. And thank you so much for the question. And I'm going to comment on this also. So Arjan, and the light's right in my eyes, so I'm going to do my best with this. Arjan X Kapoor, thank you so much for being here, says, COVID tipped me over. First time I fully comprehended the damage CB, central banks, have done to the price of everything. Let me first respond to that a little bit, because everyone knows I've got my wacky, maybe not everybody knows, but I've got my own kind of, I look at this era as the fastest roll-up of power in history. And Meltem, and we had that conversation, right? It's the fastest roll-up of power in history. I've been observing it actually for about 10 years now. And now I've just seen it kind of become kind of codified, right? And now we're seeing, and without belaboring it too much, or I look at this period as the Peloponnesian War and I'm its Thucydides, right? Kind of a great way of characterizing myself. So COVID tipped, so Arjan X Kapoor says, COVID tipped me over. First time I fully comprehended the damage central banks have done to the price of everything. It's hard not to be really painfully aware of that, and be painfully aware of the Great Reset and however it, whatever it is and whatever it becomes, that it's certainly going to be a lot of wealth extraction that occurs through dollar and it occurs through payroll with that type of a frequency. So there's got to be some way of securing your money against it.
And I think that the really interesting thing about what happened in March, Adam, you might recall there was a meme that became very popular in March, and the meme was "Money printer go burr."
I hated that.
I know, but look, it was the first time that we had a meme about central bank policy. Before that, it had not entered the national consciousness. So in March, what happened? People were sitting at home, they're watching what's happening. For the first time, it entered the national consciousness and the popular zeitgeist of our time. I have never heard teenagers talking about monetary and fiscal policy on TikTok. And that happened in March and has continued to happen. People are getting smarter. People like Pomp and myself and lots of other people online are trying to find easy ways to explain these very complicated concepts so that people can grasp what is happening right now.
Yeah, it is really interesting. And Naval said something that I ponder. And it turns out I know Naval's brother. So I think of Naval's brother every time I think of Naval, which is a good thing. And Naval said that for kids growing up today, they're closer to Bitcoin than they are to gold.
Of course.
They're really interesting.
I don't want to own like shiny rocks. What can I do with a shiny rock? I want to own internet money.
And we're going to skip. It's a speed round, and we're going to try and stick to a half an hour. So Mordai Kalun, is that correct? I'm probably mispronouncing a little bit, so please be forgiving of me. Says, hello, I just got in a game 14 hours ago.
Welcome to Bitcoin.
Yeah, I agree. And I have within my investor series, and as many people know, I have my own family office, and we still haven't made any allocation. And we've been happy being spectators to it. And we've been observing it over the last few years since I sold it at 3,000. I went into Netflix and I went into some other types of things. But certainly it's now out of a laboratory, right? It was in a laboratory and it was going through a gauntlet for many, many years. And it is remarkable how many tests it's kind of satisfied now. So Mr. MY Singapore, thank you again. Who controls changes in the source code of Bitcoin? Please explain in detail. I don't know if detail is possible.
Sure. So look, Bitcoin is an open source software project. If you go to bitcoincore.org, you can see the entire repo. There's a maintainer of the Bitcoin Core repository. And the control of the Bitcoin Core repository was passed from Satoshi to Gavin Andresen to now Peter Woolley. MIT employs a number of developers. Different organizations in the space fund open source development through non-political sort of institutions. But the community controls the source code. There's a process called the BIP process, the Bitcoin improvement process, where anyone can propose improvements to the Bitcoin code. There's a mailing list that you can join via the Bitcoin Core site, so you can see all of the upgrade proposals and how they get passed. It's an ACNAC process. But look, there's no single person in control. It's a community project. It's an open source project. And if you're interested in how open source communities work, I highly recommend the book Working in Public, written by Nadia Eghbal. It just came out earlier this year. It's a great anthology of open source software communities and how they function.
That was awesome. So we're going to look at our last questions right now. So Witty states, thank you so much for being here. Is that a statue? That looks like a statue, the picture that you've chosen. It's very nice. So I can't, says, I can't help but view, most likely unfairly, Bitcoin is like a pyramid scheme.
This is a fair criticism, and this is one I hear a lot. I think one of the mental challenges that people have when they look at Bitcoin is the fact that Bitcoin has capped supply. So typically what we do when the price of something goes up is we create more of it, right? So Tesla, its stock price soars. What do? They issue more shares to take advantage of demand for Tesla shares in the market. US government, there's demand for dollars around the world. FX rates change in a way that's favorable to the dollar, makes the dollar more valuable. What do? They print more dollars. The thing about Bitcoin is, as the demand for Bitcoin increases, the supply does not change, right? The supply is fixed. We know the supply schedule of Bitcoin precisely. There are going to be 21 million Bitcoin by the year 2140. 85% of the Bitcoin supply has already been minted. And so what's interesting is Bitcoin has a programmatic supply curve, but an infinite demand curve, right? And so as there's more and more demand for Bitcoin, particularly as institutions start buying and Bitcoin get taken out of the market via ETPs, trusts, and other investment vehicles, there's less and less Bitcoin to go around for people who want to buy it. So the supply and demand dynamics of Bitcoin lead to these exponential price rises that can happen very, very rapidly. But again, you know, everyone has equal access to Bitcoin. Anyone with a phone and an internet connection or computer and an internet connection can access Bitcoin, get access to Bitcoin, exposure to Bitcoin.
Do you see any of the movement in Bitcoin as a consequence of a short squeeze?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you have to look at the CME contract settlement as well. So the options market in Bitcoin's trading 10 trillion of notional this year. It's becoming a really big market. And so you have to look at expiry and open interest and net interest. So you have to really look at when these large contract liquidations are happening, because they do cause price movements.
And so now we're going to go on. It's kind of the speed round now. We're almost at the really speed round, which is like Jeopardy, where you got to do that thing. But we're kind of the Family Feud type of speed round. So Omar, thank you so much for being here. Aside from Bitcoin, what other cryptos are you excited about?
My website, meltemdemirrors.com. I list all of my investments, including all of the cryptocurrencies I'm invested in.
Okay, well, that's too quick.
Okay. Sure. So look, after Bitcoin, I hold Ethereum, right? Ethereum is the second largest cryptocurrency by market cap. There's a lot of really interesting things happening on top of Ethereum, including a lot of really interesting stuff in the capital market space. So I'm excited about Ethereum. Very different value proposition. There are a number of assets I'm interested in, but I really can't talk about them here. You can go to my website where I have all the appropriate disclosures that accompany listing of all of my positions. If I own more than $1,000 of something, I disclose it on my website so you know what my incentives are.
Yeah, you guys are, I keep on saying you guys, and it's so unfair. And we were just discussing this a little bit over the weekend, but you know, it's not meant in any type of gender specific way. It's just meant as this collective of humanity. And I'm, in the future, perhaps the kids growing up today will call everyone, you women, and I'm fine with that too. I don't really care. As long as I'm a part of humanity, then I accept it, right? So yep. Please accept it in that spirit. So Valina, who is wonderful, and Valina was on our Investor Series 1.0, and during
I loved her show. Valina, you are amazing. I learned so much from you.
She is amazing, and we were discussing the bifurcation of the world, and her specialization is Dragon Bear, which is really looking at the bifurcation of the world and the influence of Russia and China. And it's really remarkable. And she and I agree on so many things. And we're going to have to meet in India one day. And it's going to be fun. So Valina asked, what will happen to Bitcoin if the U.S. government introduces digital dollar as a currency? Beyond what it has now. Yeah.
Absolutely nothing. A dollar is a dollar is a dollar, no matter what medium it's in. Digitizing the dollar doesn't change its value proposition. At the end of the day, it's just an instantiation of a dollar in a different form. So in my view, as zero impact on Bitcoin, at the end of the day, I actually think it might drive more people into Bitcoin, because if we have a digital dollar, the government can extract taxes. It can implement monetary policy directly and programmatically via the software that controls the digital dollar. So I actually think in a world with a digital dollar, with the erosion of physical cash and the privacy and the security that it provides from financial censorship by governments, things like Bitcoin become so much more valuable. The Human Rights Foundation has done a great series on how Bitcoin is critical to preserving free speech, particularly in economies where dissidence is extremely, extremely dangerous. You need free speech money. Bitcoin is free speech money. So I actually think a digital dollar promotes Bitcoin because it promotes the preservation of free speech.
And I'm going to add two things to that and ask two things to that also, which is kind of free association. So they're not in any particular proper order. Is I saw JP Koenig, who does a really he's kind of a finance historian and he's been a real critic, but he seems to be eager to see everybody deplatformed in any way, shape, or form, and even on platforms that facilitate Bitcoin transactions. So I definitely do see the threat of even the regulators and the not free speech enthusiasts coming after Bitcoin.
Yeah. And look, right now, if you look at what's happening with the Earn It Act in Section 230 in the United States, and SESTA also, right? Free speech in this country is one of the most valuable principles upon which America was founded. We are seeing right now in this fastest roll-up of power an attempt by Mitch McConnell in particular and Lindsey Graham to remove the ability for Americans to have the right to free speech online. Pseudonymity, since the dawn of history, has been critical to preserving people's ability to have free speech. The founders of this country used a pseudonym for this purpose because they needed pseudonymity to have free speech, to express their ideas freely. Yeah, and so again, this is so important. I can't overstate what a crackdown we're seeing on free speech. Deplatforming, censorship, it happens at every level. And if you look at the history of financial regulation and financial censorship in this country, money is the primary tool that America uses to censor things that do not align with its own interests. So I am 100% optimistic about the future of Bitcoin as free speech money. So optimistic.
And I'm going to keep the other question in the back of my head until I remember it, because I told you it's free association, and then I'll just shout it out. So Satoshi Yi, thank you so much for being here. Adam, would you have Craig Wright on as a guest? Yeah. Actually, you know who I've got on as a guest and coming up, I think next week, and I think I discussed this with you a little bit, Meltem, is the producer, director, and writer of Dark City. So yeah, I'm so excited about that. So that's going to be a lot of fun. So Dexter Lab Zero, thank you so much for being here. And what a nice picture that is, right? That little dolly type of thing. It says, what are some secure platforms with low fees to buy Bitcoin?
Yeah, can you hear me okay still, Adam?
We can.
Okay, secure platforms with low fees. So as I mentioned, if you just want price exposure to Bitcoin, I think Square's Cash App, PayPal are two really easy ways to get Bitcoin without high fees. If you want to actually hold your own Bitcoin, the service that I like to use is River, which is a Bitcoin-only brokerage. I also really like Gemini. Gemini is a great platform that's accessible here in the state of New York, so that's really nice. But there are a number of highly trusted platforms. My favorites, again, are River and Gemini, as well as Square and PayPal.
Okay, and thank you so much for that. And we're going to rip through them. So now it's kind of like Answer, right? But it's more like it was before Family Feud, and now it's like Jeopardy, because I want to be respectful for everybody's phone. So Xavier Oss, which I would imagine means Australian, what a nice picture you've taken. You might want to mute until you go on, Meltem, just to hear a little bit of background. Yeah. So Xavier Oss says, if we agree crypto is the future, why should the winner be Bitcoin? The price seems too volatile.
Yeah. So we have this conversation a lot. Bitcoin.
hold on, because your voice is breaking up a little. Yeah. Okay, try it again.
Now?
No. Yeah, cool.
Okay, I'm teetering on the brink of having no battery left because I've been on the phone all day. So look, crypto has historically been volatile. Crypto's volatility this year is at all-time lows, and macro markets are more volatile than ever. One thing people forget when we use the term volatility is relative. It's a relative measure because what you're indexing Bitcoin against is the dollar or something else. But in a world where you index back to Bitcoin, one Satoshi is one Satoshi is one Satoshi. One Bitcoin will always be one Bitcoin. So again, the idea of volatility really depends on what you're measuring against. And I would challenge you to conceptualize Bitcoin not in terms of dollar volatility, but to conceptualize it in terms of how much of the 21 million Bitcoin that will ever exist do you own?
Thank you so much for that. And I'll answer this in part also. So Vijay Kumar says, how do sovereign nations extract with crypto? And I would imagine extract wealth with crypto. And let me answer a part of that. I expect there to be a Fed coin. I think it's almost inevitable that there's quickly a Fed coin, which is $1 in, Fed coin paid out. And I can definitely imagine Bitcoin and some of the other currencies competing for monetary policy as a secondary and tertiary vehicle currency that's particularly used within like a Google City type of environment, and it's kind of a future that inevitably we're going to have. So we don't have to embrace it, but it's kind of hard to resist that element of it. I definitely understand that with China going into a kind of a bid in a crypto format, and that will kind of lead the way because they seem to almost be a leading indicator for these totalitarian measures lately, right? I can definitely imagine it drives demand for an alternate type of currency that isn't so quickly, so readily available to the Fed, and it creates kind of like a cash economy. Do you know what I mean? That you see a lot in kind of third world countries.
Yeah. So here's something that's really interesting that I want to drop on you. And Adam, I'd love to hear your reaction to this. America was an experiment in the separation of church and state. Bitcoin is an experiment in the separation of money and state. Let that sort of ferment.
Yeah,
Bitcoin is the separation of money and state. It has never been done before.
So because we were discussing how each person is the IR, and I think Bill Pulte was thoughtful enough to ponder that for us, is that something that's shared amongst, is that a common expression that's used by Bitcoin advocates, or is that kind of unique and trademark to you?
I don't believe in trademarking ideas. I know I talk about it a lot, that Bitcoin is fundamentally the separation of money and state. Not since Julius Caesar stamped his face on a gold coin 3,000 years ago have we seen this. When I talk to central bankers and I explain it to them in this manner, they say, you can't do that because you don't have an army. And my response to that is, I do have an army. Look at crypto Twitter.
Yeah.
So again, that's where we started, right? All these crazy people on the internet are going nuts for Bitcoin. This is our army. We are winning hearts and minds. And in the year 2020, what moves markets is hearts and minds. Narrative predicates reality, not the other way around. People who believe that reality drives narrative are mistaken. It's narrative that drives reality.
And we're going to continue. So Semple Plevro 34, and I recognize you, so thank you once again for joining. Thank you. Says, thoughts on the Rashida Tlaib bill. Is there anything good about a stable coin?
Yeah, so the Stable Act, which was put forth by Rashida Tlaib and a handful of other members of Congress, what the bill wants to do, stable coins are fine. And I think, again, having the ability to hold your assets in a dollar-denominated asset do matter, because a lot of people index back to the dollar, and to them, that is the risk-free asset in the market, right, is the dollar. Over time, I think that will start to change. The dollar maybe becomes more risky, but Adam, we can agree to disagree there. What the Stable Act actually proposed to do is to require anyone engaging with stable coins to obtain a banking license and to be regulated as a bank, which I think is inherently un-American and will restrict the inclusion of low-income, high-risk clients from the crypto ecosystem. It will replicate the same issues we have in our existing financial system, where the cost of compliance is so exorbitantly high in the banking sector that banks cannot afford to economically serve a large segment of the population. And so in my view, the Stable Act is antithetical to financial inclusion. It's poorly written. It was written by banking industry advocates and lobbyists, and it's fundamentally it's illogical. It has absolutely zero basis in reality, increasing the cost of compliance and only allowing large financial institutions with a huge capital moat and access to the Fed money printer and the blessing of the US government to participate in the issuance of stable coins is uncompetitive, it's un-American, and I think it has no place in US policy.
So how is, because they have all the resources of government against kind of a couple of million IR1s, right? How is the response coordinated to that?
So on the policy side, we
are on the legislative side, how is that coordinated and responded to?
Carefully is the answer.
Is there a governing type of body that exists, or some type of an oversight within the Bitcoin community that can gather the dollars to lobby?
Yes, so there are two lobbying groups in DC. The Blockchain Association is the one that I reference. There's an amazing think tank called Coin Center that's been around since 2013 that has been absolutely so foundational to the growth of this industry in the United States. And there's now the formation of the first ever crypto-focused PAC. It's called the HODL PAC. If anyone's interested in learning more about any of these efforts, feel free to reach out. I'm very involved on the lobbying and regulatory side, very important. But look, it's companies pooling their resources. It's people taking time to talk to staffers, to our representatives, to members of Congress, and it's members of Congress really being willing to listen to what the industry has to say.
Will they be listening to it and being responsive to it and being negotiable to it are very different things, though? Do you expect her and her administration and her advisors to be negotiable?
Look, I've spent time. If anyone's interested, I testified in front of the House Committee on Financial Services in 2019. You can watch the video and read my 17-page written testimony as well. It includes a lot of data points around the size and scale of the crypto industry in the United States today. Look, Republicans and Democrats appear different to us, but they're largely the same, because government right now is about seeking control. This is about control. And Bitcoin is about empowering people, not institutions. So these two forces are at odds. Right now, you know, we're living in this very interesting time where, as you said, we're witnessing the fastest roll-up of power in human history. That extends to what's happening with money, right? And wealth disparities growing.
Which is going to get a lot worse. And one of the things, and I'm going to include, and we're going to have to skip on a little bit. We really, because I want to be, and I'm going to include Eric in this. So thank you so much for being here, Eric. And what a remarkable success story. And the interesting thing, and I think about this a lot, is I've watched people become kind of Bitcoin millionaires, right? Bitcoin more than millionaires. And it's the same way when I was a kid and I just wanted to succeed. I didn't really care about school. I just wanted to kind of endure school. But I went to the libraries, the 42nd Street Library, and they used to have one that's, you know, dedicated to business. And I used to spend days just reading because I thought it was a more relevant education, right? And it did well for me on Wall Street, and I came in kind of charging. And it's very interesting now seeing the younger generation also acquiring a lot of wealth.
And Adam, here's the thing. I'm in my mid-30s. I am a millennial. My government isn't going to help me. Nobody is going to help me. I have to help myself. And Bitcoin is a tool that I think empowers individuals, not institutions. As I mentioned earlier, this is a bottoms-up movement. anyone in the United States today can access Bitcoin using their smartphone and participate in this wealth creation, where historically the creation of wealth has been limited to people who have access, assets, and are already wealthy.
Well,
so I actually think this is a great equalizer, and I love seeing young people and women creating wealth and using that wealth in ways that reflect their desired future for the world.
it is. So
our desired future.
I would spend my time in the business library and then with analysts, and then many of them became my mentors. And I was in pursuit of more perfect information than the person on the other side of the trade would have, right? So, I recognize that all information is kind of imperfect, and there's lots of momentums, and they drive different things, and there's lots of dynamics, the stocks going up and down. I wanted my information to be better than kind of my adversary, because the person on the other side of the trade is, I hate to say your enemy, but there is a little bit of a battle going on, and I'm sure Bitcoin.
You want to win. You want to win. I want to win. You want to win.
It is interesting seeing younger people understanding that college doesn't really buy you that much, and it's if somebody's in pursuit of success that they now have an alternate channel.
But Adam, let's go back to your library example, right? So knowledge is one thing. And with social media, look at what we're doing. Anyone can watch this chat. Before, we would be having this chat in a private place that no one could watch. Information and knowledge is more accessible than ever, right? And people are putting great information. They're leaking alpha all over the internet. Knowledge is step one. Step two is taking action based on that knowledge. And we're seeing that now. There are now a lot of ways that make it really easy for people to take action once they have the information and decide, hey, I want to get some exposure to Bitcoin. Our friend who 14 hours ago got into Bitcoin, right? He got that information on the internet, most likely on social media, where it's available to everyone for free. And it's really high quality analysis and information, and then was able to act on that information on a retail platform. Like, when have you seen something like this before in capital markets? Never.
And we're going to move on. And so thank you so much for that. And somebody said you might want to use one AirPod thing at a time. I don't know if that's possible.
I did that, and now I'm back. So.
Okay. So they commented, and thank you so much for being here, Hi Me 1983. The IRS is adding crypto questions on the first page of the tax form.
100%. They want to know who has Bitcoin, how much they have, because they're going to tax the crap out of it. 100%. That's what governments do. By the way, taxation is a core question here, and the IRS is going to make sure that they get every penny that they're owed. If you're exposed to crypto, it is not a good tax dodge, by the way, because the blockchain is not anonymous, it's pseudonymous, and it's a public ledger, so someone can look at all your transactions and de-anonymize your information if you're not careful. So please, everyone, if you live in the United States, pay your crypto taxes. Yeah. Taxation is a mechanism of fear. So please pay your crypto taxes.
Or spend the time and the money and set up some tax routes that gets you to the Cayman Islands and then back to a Delaware C Corp or Delaware LLC. So, but
Adam, regulatory arbitrage in this industry is a real thing. People are leaving the United States. I don't know why I'm still here, because this country makes it so prohibitively expensive to be an entrepreneur and to create wealth, right? And at the same time, the people who are extremely wealthy can afford to have these mechanisms set up to not pay such a large share of taxes. It's the middle class that gets squeezed. So yeah. I do think regulatory arbitrage will become more real. I apologize. I'm letting my political views taint my response.
I will tell you, having businesses, and we're going to get to the last questions, but having businesses, I've had businesses in Germany, I have businesses in India. I was definitely deep into inquiry into businesses in Nigeria and South Africa. But then they started battling, so it made it a little bit politically difficult. The regime here is a lot friendlier than it is elsewhere, but I can definitely see, and I'm not getting political, I'm just talking about policy. I can definitely see under the Democratic proposals and under the administration, the regime making it a little bit more hostile to businesses. And that could definitely have its consequences, that you noted that now that people have acquired a little bit of wealth, or they've got the internet, they've got the bandwidth, they don't need to stay here anymore. And there's lots of countries that are shopping for Americans, as everybody here knows. Every country in the world is shopping for Americans. We've got the education, we've got the drive, we can succeed within their environment. We have the language, right? Which is obviously critical. So you do make a really good point.
But look, the other thing is also remember, the way they got Al Capone was what? It was
yeah.
Right. So again, the US is the only country I know where you try to figure out how much tax you owe, and then if you don't do it exactly right, the IRS will come back and be like, actually, it's this number, and by the way, here's your fine. It's wild. It's absolutely wild. Taxation in this country is so confusing for a reason. It keeps people fearful of the state, and keeping people fearful is a great way to maintain your grip on power. So I do think that regime will need to change.
Well, be careful of what's coming next, because what's coming next, and I've written about it a lot, is the VAT tax, and people aren't really going to like it. So the idea of the investor series is that the only way, if all of us here can kind of get a sense of the future, right? We're all in some type of an agreement that the future doesn't allow for as much social economic mobility as earlier generations had, and that the taxing regime is so hostile that my big advantage was I didn't have to pay taxes on every single thing in life, and my house wasn't triple taxed with real estate. Younger people today can still buy a house, but the incidental costs to it are staggering. So the cost of ownership is just absolutely absurd. So I'm going to add to. So be careful of what you wish for, because the VAT tax, which is shares, which equally distributes. There's an equality to the distribution of poverty with it. So Max D, thank you so much for being here. What a nice picture you've chosen. I'm very interested in who that is, right? What the artist is.
It's Egon Schiele. Egon Schiele, no?
Oh, is it really? Oh, thank you so much. That's a nice. Yeah. So Max D, thank you for being here. And again, thank you for the picture. Says, with a limit of 21 million Bitcoin, what stops the market from moving towards another coin?
Nothing. Again, money is a collective shared fiction, right? The dollar is a shared fiction. Bitcoin is a shared fiction. What we believe is what becomes reality.
But may I pursue that a little bit, right? Because it's such, it's and this is like a lunch with friends, so I get to interrupt you, and I would expect you to interrupt me.
Adam, you can always interrupt me. I love banter, so please bring it.
Yeah. So, again, I come out of Wall Street, which was built upon imperfect pricing, right? And I'm kind of a Soros, Karl Popperian type of imperfect markets, right? So I look for momentum, and then I look for the trend, and then I look for the misconception, and ultimately they do encounter each other. And so you have kind of an asymmetricalness within a asset climb, that it takes a long time to grow, takes a long time to kind of climb up that to the cliff, and then it's a very abrupt fall once that momentum encounters kind of a reality, right? So right now, if the argument that there's a distortion field between a person's mind and and reality and information? Is there kind of a distortion field, and how much longer can that continue for? Or does it become, momentum trends don't have to end.
So here's my thing, Adam. The reality distortion field, the reality that we've been operating in, the narrative that we've held as truth and gospel for so long, is the supremacy of the dollar. And that narrative is being shattered in our minds because Bitcoin started as an idea. Now it's an inevitability. And as more and more people watch what's happening with Bitcoin, their mental model starts to shift. Because all of us, I had never, before I worked in Bitcoin, ever asked myself what money was, why it existed, how it was created. Learning about Bitcoin leads you down a series of philosophical questions that force you to confront a different version of reality, where you start to recognize that the system in which we're operating, the monetary system in which we're operating, has been carefully constructed in a certain way to perpetuate the interests of certain groups in society. And I'm not saying it's deliberate. I think some of it is just a function of natural entropy, right? And some of it perhaps is deliberate. I'm not a big conspiracy theorist. So, I think a lot of it is just entropy and chaos doing its thing. But look, what's so interesting about Bitcoin, again, is for the first time, we've created a viable way to separate money and state. And it's now an asset that has a market cap of $400 billion. And in my view, it's on its way to $1 trillion, if not more. This is profoundly exciting to me. Bitcoin has characteristics that no other coin or digital asset can replicate. And I think that philosophical narrative and that questioning of reality leads people to a conclusion. That conclusion is Bitcoin. Again, I'm biased.
And you are, and that's very fair, right? That's very fair. We all have that, and it's thoughtful that you've shared that with us. So the Whooper Nation, thank you so much for being here, says if narrative drives reality, then where does the narrative creation come from? And they're kind of positing which came first. And we did discuss it. There was some type of a little racketeering type of thing, perhaps, that gave Bitcoin a pricing history, so it could kind of keep on stacking up on top of its pricing history. So where does that narrative come from? And is that narrative certain to continue?
I'm doing my iPod dance.
Okay. We can hear you. We can hear you now. We couldn't hear you for a minute or two.
Okay, so this is a great question, Whooper Nation. Love it. There is a great book I really love. It's probably overhyped, but Baudelaire's Simulation and Simulacra is a great book. It's all about how narratives get constructed. I just wrote a post on my Substack that's called The Ministry of Truth is Coming, which is all about, who controls the future, controls the present, and who controls the past, controls the future. So there's this really interesting sort of thing that's happening with information in our world. And Adam, you and I have talked about this, so I apologize for going into this rabbit hole. When we still operated in the pre-COVID world and in sort of this physical reality, we all shared sort of common narratives and a common sense of reality. Now that our lives have become so digital and happen online, what we've seen is the fragmentation of the world into all of these little tiny slivers of reality, and they don't meet up, which is why you see so much tension when these different realities clash with one another. And so what's really interesting is there are people who are exceptional at creating narratives. And narratives come from a lot of different places, but our primary method for creating narratives is mythology, storytelling, right? And the Bitcoin story, we have the pseudonymous person, Satoshi, right? Bitcoin is very philosophical in nature. There are all of these truths that we accept in Bitcoin. Someone said earlier, it sounds like a cult. Yeah, it does sound like a cult because Bitcoin is a modern day technocratic religion to so many people. And there are symbols, there are rituals, there's iconography, there are ways that you speak, there's language that you use that designate your affiliation with this identity. So our desire for identity in a world that's defined by consumption, what we consume, Bitcoin becomes a way to consume something that says something about who you are, your principles, and what you believe in. And so I think that the drive of narrative comes from our desire to have an identity in a world where identity is difficult to define outside of our occupation, right? So I think Bitcoin's very powerful in that it gives a large group of people a way to build a shared identity and a shared vision through narrative creation. I would love to delve into this. We'll keep it brief though. If anyone wants to talk about this, DM me on Twitter. I could go on for hours. I love this rabbit hole.
You are awesome. And we went into a lot of rabbit holes in our conversation, right? It was a lot of fun. So, so this really kind of continues that narrative discussion because those things are so fluid and in themselves are volatile. Kim gets one. Thank you so much for being here. Says, but if the army, what if, because it's a continuation, but if the army deserts for another better choice. So there's kind of a portability to that narrative. So what does happen?
Yeah. So Kim, this is such a great point. And Nick Szabo, who's sort of an early innovator in the Bitcoin space and a phenomenal writer, he wrote this great post back in 2014, I believe, around Bitcoin's social scalability, which is really interesting in that nation states can only scale so far, right? The United States can't include all 9 billion people. Bitcoin has infinite social scalability because it doesn't require coordination. So Bitcoin could theoretically encompass all 7 billion people that live on this planet. So I'd welcome everyone to read into the concept of social scalability and the fact that Bitcoin's social scalability is effectively the entire world. No other movement really has that capability today, which again, I sound like a crazy person, but I really, truly, like, hopefully you hear it in what I'm saying. I feel so strongly about Bitcoin and what it offers people. It offers people a choice, and choice is so powerful.
Yeah, I think, and we'll close up, and I think that the younger generation, I became an investor in Slack because I had a dinner with Matt Straz, who founded a company called Namely. And, I was there for the creations and IPO of Trinet and Insperity and Workday and some other companies. So I'm kind of a creature of habit, right? I'm, I've got a lot of knowledge about what I have a lot of knowledge about. Because I've got a lot of information without retention is not knowledge, right? So I've spent 20 years with information and then with the retention of it. So I had a lot of knowledge about my industries. And then I remember Matt Straz, who's 2 generations younger than me, said Slack is changing your industry because they're doing. And I'm also an investor in Zero. I'm also an investor in Gusto. But those aren't as innovative or disruptive, while Slack really was doing pop-up notifications and doing a lot of pushes, a lot of interesting things. And I do have to admit that a great deal of my reluctance with Bitcoin is not just the unfamiliarity or the asymmetrical information, but just conceptually, the framework of it is just so disorienting to everything I grew up with.
And Adam, what I'd say there is a big challenge with Bitcoin is our mental models today don't necessarily accommodate something like Bitcoin. And that's why the adoption period for Bitcoin, I think, takes so long, is people need time to assimilate new information into their mental models, right? Which is why, again, a lot of what I do is really about communicating and giving people frameworks so that they can start to integrate some of these ideas into their view of the world and their mental model. Because again, I spent the early part of my career, like you, on Wall Street, in corporate America, in the boardroom. Part of what we're doing here, my job, I'm a translator, right? I have one foot squarely in the crypto world, and my job is translating what's happening in my little bubble, my little version of reality, my little shard of reality, if you will, translating it to other bubbles and other groups in a way that helps them integrate this into their mental model.
Okay, so we're going to take 2 last questions, and 3 last questions, but 2 of them are from one person. And I'm so happy to see Patricia joining us once again, because she had left social media for a while to just kind of regain herself, which is such an important thing. And it was actually Investor Series 7.5. I don't know if you ever saw that, but we did the Hahnemann Chalisa, and we did you can't invest for tomorrow unless you have an awareness of today and tomorrow, right? So, we all hopefully realize that. So thank you for briefly rejoining social media just for this. So thank you. And it's a 2-parter. And she asked, so you think even if they prohibit it in Europe, for example, it will somehow find a way? And let me include her second part of that, which is the European Commission said they wanted to forbid Bitcoin in Europe.
Sure. So Prash's side, first of all, congrats to you for taking a break from social media. I think that's hard to recognize and even harder to do. So kudos to you. I'm happy you're here for this conversation. Look, on this question, I think one of the questions I get asked most regularly about Bitcoin by everyone I chat with is, well, if the government doesn't like it, it'll shut it down. And my response to that is, let's think for a minute about what Bitcoin is. It's three different things. Bitcoin is open source code. So how do you stop people from writing and deploying code, right? And file sharing, look at the BitTorrent protocol, right? Peer-to-peer client. You have billions of nodes running across the world. Like, how do you shut that down without attacking every single node? So one, at the code level, right? It's an open source protocol. Anyone can download the protocol and run it, compile it and run it. So that's one. Two is at the physical networking level, the Bitcoin network is maintained by thousands upon thousands of supercomputers around the world running the Bitcoin code and a network of full nodes that broadcast transactions to the network. Shutting down all of those privately owned nodes would take coordination among nation states that don't work together. China and the US are not going to coordinate together to shut down every Bitcoin node, right? You can't cover the entire world. You can't shut down every node. And so I think at a physical networking level, it would be very difficult to completely stop people from running Bitcoin nodes and Bitcoin mining rigs. And then lastly, at the asset level, Bitcoin is just code. There's no physical instantiation of a Bitcoin, right? And so I think the hard part for people to grasp is you can't destroy a Bitcoin. I can't go and seize a digital asset in the same way I can't seize a physical asset. I can
legislate, but you can. So you're right. I mean, I see that there's two ways. Okay, there's the brute force way, which is you're right. They can't just storm all the Bastilles of Bitcoin, right? But then there is perhaps the more destructive, which is the legislative.
Of course. And this is happening. We have, had issues with regulators in every jurisdiction. The European Commission has actually done something different. They don't want to forbid Bitcoin. What Europe is trying to do under MiCA, so this act is called MiCA, M-I-C-A, you can look it up. They're trying to create uniform regulation for Bitcoin throughout the entire EU member state area, which is very different. So they want to introduce a regulatory scheme where anyone who touches Bitcoin through a business that is domiciled in the EU would have to do KYC AML for any amount under over $250. And so basically what the EU just wants to do is create a scheme where they will know who's interacting with Bitcoin. They'll have all this information on them, and they'll have the ability to go to these businesses and service providers and regulate and legislate them. But at the end of the day, right, on the internet, anyone can be a dog. So, this is this fundamental disconnect, a geriatric 7-year-old representative in the United States of America writing regulation around digital money. Like, it just doesn't work because the two realities we're operating in are so far apart. They're like night and day, right? And you saw this when they called in Facebook and Twitter CEO to testify. We had people sitting in Congress asking the CEO of Twitter about spam mail filters. Like, it's embarrassing. I think we should be embarrassed that this is our leadership.
Wow.
Sorry, I'm feeling feisty.
That was awesome. That was really awesome. And I like people recognizing their adversaries and treating them as such. In order to be successful at anything, we've got to have a little bit of contempt for the person on the other side of that trade. And particularly when they're so hostile.
I have empathy. But my empathy extends this far. I will sit down with you and I will happily explain and answer questions. But if you are openly aggressive and you are hostile to my interests and you refuse to listen when I travel miles on my own dollar to come to you with empathy and spend time with you, then it's done. And then you become my enemy. I will always start with empathy, but when you demonstrate that you are not willing to learn, I'm not going to continue spending my time and energy on you. And I think that we see this over and over again. Our government doesn't care. It's all performance theater. I don't need to participate in performance theater.
Yeah, and we're going to close up in just a minute or two. But you're right, it is performance theater. And one thing I think everybody has seen is COVID, even with the masks. And I'm not talking about the seriousness of it. I'm not trying to diminish any part of it. There is no doubt a theatrical element to create chaos where it's almost kabuki theater. And even those people who are, persuaded, who are not persuaded, but who are staunch, everyone must wear a mask and it's, this thing has to be contained versus, the oppositional forces to that. And most of the people who exist in the middle, they're there's a kabuki theater element. I think I saw Kamala Harris wearing a mask, and it was a kind of a theatrical mask, and there was nobody within 100 feet of her. And so I can certainly understand that Bitcoiners, there's a philosophy of kind of a complete philosophy, because from my experience, the Bitcoiners are fairly well-read in philosophy. Perhaps it kind of is a feature, is a characteristic of that type. And I love discussing philosophy. So I'm just going to say, Sample Plevro 34, what's the best state for wealth creation? New York is great. And we just did a investor Periscope with series with Ian Sigalo, who's one of the top venture capitalists in the country. And he's extremely bullish on New York. I have a home in New York. I'm still domiciled here. I'm very, very bullish on New York. I'm still very bullish. I've known the mayor for 20 years. I've known whoever might be the next mayor for, probably at least 10 years, depending upon who it is. But I think New York is much more resilient than the other cities. Kumar just moved to Miami, and I sold my crash pad in San Francisco 2 years ago. And people were really irritated. I go on Twitter and I'd say, San Francisco sucks. It's disgusting. And there's so much contempt for wealth. It's amazing. I've never seen anything like it. They all want money, so much so that there's a contempt for those of us who have worked for 30 years to acquire wealth. So there's like an iPhone envy, that their idea of wealth is the newest generation of iPhone. I still have a 6-year-old Pixel 2. So I think New York, I think the better tax havens are going to be good. I definitely do see the threat of an incoming administration imposing carbon taxes and imposing a lot of the hostility that we've seen in Europe. And that is going to drive some of our best intellectual capital. There's going to be an immigrant dividend, that there's going to be an immigration from America that might give India or some other downstream innovator country kind of their own immigrant dividend. So it's
Adam, hold on. I want to interrupt you for a moment. I think in San Francisco, you not only have contempt for wealth, you have contempt for poverty. And that is the bigger problem, is there is a contempt for poverty, because people look at the city, right? There's not enough housing for the population. There's a lot of poverty. There's a great wealth inequality. And the wealthy look down on people who live in poverty, instead of saying, let's deploy our resources to help these people. They're voting for the elected officials. So I find it really ridiculous that a bunch of people who created the conditions that make San Francisco what it is are now leaving, and they're going to ruin Austin. They're going to ruin Miami. Yeah. They're going to take all these cities, because they're the problem. They have a contempt for poverty. The issue is not contempt for wealth, it's contempt for poverty.
I think, I've discussed it a lot, since a lot of philosophy, so I don't want to bother everybody with it, but it's actually a contempt for beauty too. And by beauty, I mean great art, great philosophy, great literature. And I would go to their devotional houses of devotion, whether it be Bhakti or whether it be Hare Krishna, whether it be Muslim. Sometimes you just want to get away, and it's a big part of Nancy, my life, to keep away from consumerism. And
hi, Nancy. Where's Nancy today?
She's working in the back. And it was crazy, because even their religious institutions have really drive consumerism. I mean, so much. It's actually distressing, because it is what it is. So we're going to close up. I can't believe I talked so much on the way out of it. And there's 2 interesting points. So Hi Me 1983 again says Bitcoin is a constitution in action. What does that mean?
Bitcoin is about freedom and self-sovereignty, which is what this country was founded on. I think that's what that means. Bitcoin is about giving people agency, the right to assembly, the right to free speech. Bitcoin is assembly. We're assembling in digital space.
That's awesome. I know. Yeah, it leaves me speechless. That's really interesting. So I'm going to actually close up on that note. But first, I want to thank Eric again for being here, and great stream, and thank you for joining it. And wait,
I want to close with my bowl. So.
Oh wow! Do you bring that wherever you go?
No.
Okay. Yeah. So that's
Bitcoin's coming. Here's my bowl.
Yeah. That's great. So we're going to close up, and I want to thank everybody for this time. And we did this really spontaneously. I saw Bitcoin today, and I just appreciate everybody on such short notice having so much fun with this. It's actually going to wind up being an investor series like 10.5, and I'll make sure that everybody has a chance to see it. And that's it. I really want to thank you, Meltem, with the most perfect name ever. I really want to thank you so much for making yourself available and just kind of helping inform all of us.
Look, I am one person. I encourage everyone to seek out multiple different perspectives, including ones you don't agree with, because you'll learn something. So thank you to you, Adam, for putting this series together. I've been following along. I love it. Thank you to everyone for being here, asking such great questions. If anyone wants to reach out, my DMs are open. And I hope everyone has the most amazing day. It's been a tough year. We're at the tail end of it. Do not lose hope. Keep fighting, because I think together we can bend the arc of reality. And we're doing that with Bitcoin, and we're going to do it again and again and again, because the power is in all of us, and we can accomplish a lot if we work together.
Crazy question I have to ask though is because it just occurred to me, is Bitcoin trading with a lot of volume now? I mean, so when you look at the volume of it, the historical volume of it, what do you see happening right now?
Yeah, so Bitcoin liquidity is typically 10 to 20 billion in traded volume a day. It's hard to get exact numbers because a lot of it is done bilaterally, not via established exchanges that are reporting numbers. But if you look, there's a great website called coinmetrics.com that tracks on-chain activity. Because Bitcoin is a public ledger, we can see how much Bitcoin is transferred on any given day on the Bitcoin network. And as I mentioned to you, we have just crossed $1 trillion of value transferred across the Bitcoin network this year. So it's pretty exciting. Overall options volume hit $10 trillion a couple of weeks ago. We've already trebled last year's options volume. There's tremendous depth, there's tremendous liquidity in these markets, and it's only continuing to grow as Bitcoin becomes more and more integrated into our existing financial system.
You are awesome. And once again, I want to thank everybody for allowing Meltem and I to be the guest on your feed today.
Adam, we said we would do 30 minutes. It's been 90 minutes. I love you. You go. You have things to do. Say hi to me. Thank you for having me.
Okay, stay with me for 1 second because I'm going to hang up on everybody. I'm going to click that button. You can't see it, but it's on the upper right hand. And we're all going to say goodbye except for you. You and I will stay here for just a minute longer. So thank you, everybody. And thank you for your time and have a wonderful day.
And happy 10K. Woo!